A new plan is in the works in San Francisco meant to transform two neighborhoods that have long struggled with homelessness and drugs, the Tenderloin and the South of Market. Supervisor Bilal Mahmoud plans to introduce legislation that would require at least one homeless shelter or behavioral health facility in every district of the city. Right now, the Tenderloin and Soma are home to a disproportionate number of those sites. Supervisor Mahmoud's measure lays out an 18-month time frame for city agencies to set up those new facilities.
Okay, so we want to talk more about this effort with Supervisor Mahmoud. Thank you so much, Bilal, for being here. Obviously, you represent the Tenderloin, so tell us what you've been hearing from people in the neighborhood regarding the number of homeless shelters and services in that area.
Yeah, so this legislation was done on behalf of the community. For too long, for decades, certain neighborhoods from the Tenderloin to Soma, Mission, the Bayview have borne the brunt of the responsibility for housing, for our fentanyl crisis, and for homeless services as well. And what they want is equity. We want every district in the city to do their fair share because we are one city. And this legislation is really about accomplishing that goal of ensuring that it's setting a floor. Every district just has to approve one site within the next year to make progress and show that we're all contributing our fair share.
Yeah, asking people across the city to shoulder the burden together. But, you know, Supervisor, this is not the first time that someone in San Francisco has tried an approach that I guess is similar to what you're doing. Back in 2019, then Supervisor Matt Henney proposed legislation to force other parts of the city to open navigation centers, but that legislation failed to pass. What have you learned from that experience, and how have you adjusted this legislation, and why do you think your plan's going to be any different?
Yeah, I think we're at a very unique point in time where we are working off the shoulders of great supervisors who've come before to set the foundation. Supervisor Jane Kim tried this, then Supervisor Matt Haney, and now Assembly member, and they've endorsed our plan as well. And because of the now makeup of the board, we already have the votes to pass this legislation with co-sponsors of supervisors from the west side and the east side. I'm co-authoring this with Supervisor Shawan Walton, who represents the Bayview, which has also had a heavy concentration of services in their district. So I think it's a very unique point in time where we have a new board of supervisors that was elected in January, and we are working together collaboratively. And so the first time in many decades in our city's history, we have a board of supervisors that's functioning and looking at the city as a whole rather than neighborhood by neighborhood. And I think that's a really critical part of the story.
Okay, so Supervisor, how do you envision this playing out? Do you envision that people who are struggling with mental health addiction and homelessness in the Tenderloin, let's say, will somehow take advantage of a service, of a center in the Sunset?
I think the important thing to recognize is that people who go into homeless are becoming homeless everywhere in the city. I was out in the street teams with people in the Tenderloin, the new hot teams that are there, and they were telling me about a man in the Richmond who had become homeless. And because there are 0 emergency shelters in the Richmond, they didn't want to go to the Tenderloin because people become homeless in every neighborhood. And I think that's the thing we have to recognize is that unless those people who live there have somewhere to go, they either go onto the street or have to go into other neighborhoods that don't want to. And that's what this legislation is about making sure there are available resources in the districts for the people who may be unhoused or become unhoused in those neighborhoods. But also we're making sure to not replicate the mistakes in the past. One of the critical components of this legislation is a 1,000-feet rule, which that no two shelter or behavioral health sites can be within 1,000 feet of each other. Because we have seen what's happened in the Tenderloin and Soma, where you concentrate services so much in one neighborhood, it affects the small businesses, it affects the families and the children who live there. So we don't want to make those same mistakes. And that's why that very important rule is here as well, so that other districts don't see the same results as we've seen in the past.
Finally, Supervisor, what are you doing and how are you preparing for what you have to expect is going to be some significant pushback from people, from business owners in some of these other neighborhoods that say, look, I don't want a homeless shelter near me. What is going to be the argument that you approach them with to convince them that this is the right strategy and what's best for the city of San Francisco as a whole?
I mean, two things. One, we work collaboratively with supervisors on the west side. We already have Supervisor Melgar, who represents District 7, which also has 0 emergency shelters, and she's working collaboratively on this legislation. Two, the 1,000 feet rule that we just talked about, sharing with people that they're not going to see a concentration of services in their neighborhood. And actually, it's going to help the people that they might see on the streets in their neighborhood come inside. And then three, showing the models for how we are doing homeless services these days is very different than the past. We just had a site, 822 Geary, open up in my district. In that component, we have guaranteed safety, police presence, ambassadors that are there, and that's kept it going and safe and very well functioning. And I think that's the model for what we want to see in different districts as well. So we are ensuring guaranteed safety, ensuring ambassadors, but also ensuring that we're not concentrating in any one place. And that's what we hope to do again. Learning from the mistakes of the past of what's happened in my district and making sure it's not replicated across the rest of the city.
Okay, Supervisor Mahmood, appreciate your time tonight. We know that you're going to be introducing this to the Board of Supervisors next week. We'll be following what happens after that. Thanks so much. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.
All right.